Beyond the gate, spoilers tease that the tension between Hayley and Dani is repeating. A heavy hush settles over the sterile corridors of St. Augustine Medical Center, where white walls meet the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights. The air holds a chill that seeps into bone and soul, lending a brittle edge to every whispered conversation and hurried step. Here, beneath the hum of overhead monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen tanks, Bill lies wounded, a man caught between life and the shadow of his past. Each beep of the heart monitor is a reminder that fragile peace can be shattered with startling ease. When Hayley Parker first stepped into the hospital room, the scent of antiseptic mingled with her own quickened pulse. The pale light caught the tremor in her hand as she reached for Bill's. Her eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, were clouded with a fierce protectiveness. Memories of their wedding days and drenched vows, laughter shared under a canopy of bougainvillea floated before her, igniting a determination that bordered on desperation. Bill slumbered, his features drawn by pain and exhaustion, but at that moment, he represented more than the man she loved. He embodied the future she was determined to secure. From the very beginning of Bill's hospitalization, Dani had been a constant presence. Dani Hamilton, Bill's ex-wife, moved through the ward with a practiced grace, weaving her way past nurses' stations and curtained alcoves. She wore soft pastel cardigans and low-heeled shoes, an appearance so demure it failed to disguise the steel beneath. Her visits began with a polite knock and a gentle nod, but Hayley saw through the veneer. Behind Dani's sympathetic gaze lurked something else: entitlement, a claim to the man whose heart had once belonged to her. Even now, as she hovered at Bill's bedside, offering sips of water and whispered reassurances, Dani's eyes flicked to Hayley, searching for weakness. Nicole, Dani's older sister, had made her stance abundantly clear from the moment Hayley arrived. Nicole Worthington was a force of nature, tall, impeccably dressed, with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes like flint. She traipsed through the hospital halls with the authority of someone who took no nonsense. Whispered rumors had followed her here, a scathing critique of Hayley's character, accusations that she'd stolen Bill away, that she was the architect of Dani's heartbreak. Whenever Hayley appeared, Nicole materialized at her side like a vengeful shadow. Her icy gaze and clipped diatribes were calculated to make Hayley second-guess her right to stand beside Bill's bedside. Tensions that simmered beneath the surface threatened to boil over during the first week of Bill's recovery. Hayley would arrive at dawn, the hush of pre-dawn light filtering through the blinds, only to find Nicole perched in the visitor's chair, poised to pounce. "You really shouldn't be here," Nicole would say, her voice low enough for Hayley alone to hear. "He needs family, not opportunists." Hayley's fists clenched at her sides, but she held her ground. "I love him," she would say softly. "I'm his wife. I belong here." These repeated confrontations carved grooves of bitterness through their interactions. Nobody noticed the conflict more keenly than Bill himself, the minute he'd awaken and glance around the room with bleary eyes. He saw Hayley's relief-flushed cheeks, the way her hand would brush against his, and he saw the tension in Dani's jaw as she hovered beyond the thin veil of the curtain. And when Nicole joined, he recognized the storm gathering beyond the hospital's calm facade. It pained him to be the center of it all, especially knowing how dangerous the eruption could become. It was on the fifth night of Bill's stay that the situation reached a breaking point. Late rounds had finished, and the halls were abandoned to the soft hum of the night shift. Dani stood by the window, her silhouette fragile against the windswept sky. Hayley slipped in behind her, determined to speak peace into the brewing storm. "Dani," she began, her voice steady but soft. Dani turned, her face pale beneath the hospital's glow. "Hayley, please," she said, a tremor betraying her calm exterior. "I'm here for Bill." Hayley sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead. "And I'm here for Bill, too. This isn't about you and me. It's about him." But Dani shook her head, backing away with an intensity that belied vulnerability. He was my husband first. I'll do anything to protect him. Nicole arrived then, her footsteps echoing through the room. Hayley, she interjected, her tone clipped. You need to leave. Hayley turned, her posture straightening. I'm not going anywhere. Furious that the hospital's sanctity had become a battleground, Hayley's voice hardened. Your vendetta against me won't stand in the way of my marriage. Nicole laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. You think a piece of paper and some pretty vows make you his wife? You stole him from my sister. Hayley's eyes flashed with indignation. I didn't steal anyone. We fell in love on our own terms. As she stepped forward, the tension in the room crackled like static. Moments later, the door to Bill's room swung open, drawing the trio's attention. A nurse armed with a clipboard peered in, her brow furrowed. Visiting hours are over, she reminded them. Hayley lifted her chin but retreated toward the doorway. Nicole allowed her a smug smile before turning back to Dani. We need to talk, she said, her tone conspiratorial. Dani nodded, and the two slipped into the hallway, leaving Hayley alone in the soft hush of the room. She stared at Bill's sleeping form, guilt and frustration warring in her chest. How had a simple hospital visit become a stage for old wounds? That night, driven by a mix of anger and desperation, Hayley made a fateful call. The glow of her cell phone illuminated her determined face as she spoke quietly into the receiver. I need a lawyer, she said. Dani Hamilton is going to pay for this. It was an ultimatum, severing the fragile truce she had once tried to foster. She knew the risks legal battles dredged up the past, and the past was a minefield of betrayal and violence. The catalyst for that phone call lay buried in the wreckage of their wedding day. Friends and family still whispered about the tragic event the day Dani had crashed the ceremony with a gun aimed at her ex-husband and the woman by his side. The grandeur of the venue, a grand manor house draped in roses and lanterns, had been shattered by the echo of a gunshot. Hayley remembered her gasp of horror as Dani's finger tightened on the trigger. The crystalline world she'd believed in imploded in an instant, leaving only the stark reality of fear and betrayal. Bill, acting on instinct, had wrestled the weapon from Dani's hand. The memory of that struggle haunted him, the feel of cold metal against his palm, the slick bead of sweat that mapped Dani's desperation. The guests had fled in terror, their elegant gowns and tuxedos abandoned in a stampede. And when Bill had pushed Dani aside, retrieving the gun, he had seen a flash of profound anguish in her eyes, an anguish that transcended rage and hinted at madness. Yet even in that moment, after the weapon was secured and the police were called, Bill had returned to Hayley's side. In the midst of chaos, he had whispered vows of love, insisting they proceed with the ceremony. They had, too. In an act of defiance against fear, they had stood before their community and recited their promises. They had sealed their union with a kiss, even as Dani sat handcuffed at the edge of the property and the night air carried the distant wail of sirens. Hayley had never felt more alive, nor more terrified. The day that should have been the happiest of her life had instead become a testament to the power of choice in the face of violence. They had chosen to stand together, come what may. In the days that followed, the shadow of that ceremony lingered. Dani had been charged with attempted murder, her mugshot splashed across local news channels. Hayley pressed for the maximum sentence, determined to protect her new life. But Bill, torn by residual feelings for his ex-wife and a fierce desire for harmony, insisted Dani deserved mercy. At Hayley's behest, he worked behind the scenes to have the charges reduced. He visited the district attorney, pledging character references and highlighting Dani's history of mental health struggles. Hayley, torn between gratitude for Bill's compassion and frustration at his leniency, ultimately relaxed her stance. She believed that allowing Dani a chance at freedom might bring closure. The charges were downgraded from attempted murder to unlawful discharge of a firearm. Dani served community service and was released under probationary terms. Hayley had hoped that this compromise would foster peace, but instead it left the possibility of Dani's return dangling like a threat. When Bill and Hayley arrived home after the trial, they locked their front door behind them and held each other in the silent glow of their living room, hearts pounding with relief and fear. They had survived the unthinkable. They had promised each other they would endure anything except each other's doubts. Now, months later, Bill lay recuperating in a hospital bed, the result of a routine surgical complication that had spiraled into a dangerous infection. Hayley believed the world owed them a respite, a calm after the storm. Instead, she found herself drawn back into the vortex of Dani's vendetta. The sight of Dani's pale face hovering above the mint-green sheets of Bill's hospital bed was a blow that threatened to overturn all she had fought to build. The mere presence of Dani, free and brazen, undermined every argument Hayley had once used to justify mercy. As the afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, Hayley rehearsed each argument she would present to her attorney. She pictured herself seated across a mahogany desk in a sleek, downtown law office, papers and legal briefs spread before her like the debris of a battlefield. She imagined the moment the lawyer confirmed her case charges would be filed, a restraining order served, and Dani would finally be held accountable. Hayley's heart pounded at the thought of Dani imprisoned behind cold steel bars, prevented from violating the sanctity of her marriage again. Yet beneath that righteous fury lay a bedrock of fear. Fear that Dani's anguish would twist into even more dangerous behavior, fear that Bill's recovery would be jeopardized by courtroom drama, fear that the fragile stability they had forged together would crack and shatter. She could see Nicole's smug face the day Dani was taken away, but she also saw Dani's hollow eyes and felt her own chest tighten with guilt. The decision to sue was not just a strategic move, it was a declaration that mercy had limits, that love could not conquer all. Even now, as she slid into the visitor's chair beside Bill, Hayley's resolve wavered. Bill's eyes fluttered open, and he offered her a weak smile. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. His tone was gentle, the echo of his compassion a balm to her storm. Hayley squeezed his hand, her voice soft but firm. "I have to," she replied. "I need to know we're safe." Bill closed his eyes again, and Hayley watched the rise and fall of his chest. Outside the window, the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows that crept across the floor like dark fingers. In that moment, she made a silent vow. She would see this through, no matter the cost. She would navigate the labyrinth of legal maneuvers, face Dani across a courtroom, and demand justice. And then only then would she allow herself to breathe easy. But as the world beyond the hospital doors continued on, oblivious to the storm of vendettas and loyalties unfolding within, Hayley could not know what other secrets and heartbreak awaited. All she knew was that once the gates had opened, there was no turning back from the path she had chosen. A hush settled over the courthouse as Hayley Parker took her seat at the plaintiff's table, the muffled shuffle of paperwork and the low murmur of spectators swirling around her like eddies in a restless stream. To her left, Bill sat, his posture straighter than she had seen in weeks, no longer the fragile figure confined to a hospital bed, but a man who had reclaimed some of his old strength, buoyed by love and steely resolve. Across the aisle, Dani Hamilton watched with unreadable eyes, her usually composed mask now cracked at the edges. In the gallery, Nicole Worthington perched near the back, her gaze calculating, fingers entwined as though she wove knots of strategy in the air. From the moment the judge called the case, the tension in the room was palpable. The charges from unlawful harassment to reckless endangerment danced on the tip of Hayley's tongue as she listened to the prosecutor lay out the timeline: months of unwanted visits, the more than tense confrontation at the hospital, the late-night threats left on voicemail. Each item was a stark testament to Dani's determination to reclaim proximity to Bill, a determination Hayley was now determined to thwart. As the prosecutor's final slide clicked away, showing a photograph of Dani outside Bill's hospital door, Hayley felt a rush of vindication. She wasn't the villain here. She was the protector. Dani's defense attorney rose, tall and impeccably tailored, voice smooth as silk. He acknowledged Dani's past, her love for Bill, their shared life, but argued that her actions were driven not by malice, but by desperation, by a fear of losing her family once and for all. My client, he intoned, is not a criminal mastermind. She is a broken woman, reaching out to the only person she ever truly loved. Hayley felt a stab at her heart. The courtroom didn't know the half of it: the gun, the broken vows, the betrayal that had turned love into a weapon. Yet she forced her expression to remain impassive, reminding herself that this was not the place for passion, this was a place for evidence. When the first witness was called, a night shift nurse from St. Augustine, Hayley leaned forward. The nurse described Dani's visits: the tear-stained face, the half-whispered apologies, the silent tears streaming down the hospital room's sterile walls. She would stand by Mr. Parker's bed for hours, the nurse testified, sometimes talking to herself, sometimes clutching a photograph. The photograph, the nurse said, was a wedding portrait of Bill and Dani from years ago, edges worn. Every time the nurse gently suggested Dani leave, Dani would grip the photo tighter and shake her head, defiance and grief mingling in her eyes. This testimony, simple yet searing, struck a chord in the courtroom. Hayley felt tears sting her own eyes, tears for the woman who was once the light of Bill's life, now twisted by sorrow into something dangerous. Next to take the stand was Bill himself. As he stood, there was a quiet rustle. The audience leaned in. Bill cleared his throat, the resonance of his voice filling the wood-paneled room. He spoke of that fateful day, the pain of being drawn into a courtroom drama he never wanted, the anguish of watching the two women he loved stand on opposite sides like gladiators in a ring. His eyes found Hayley's, and she squeezed his hand beneath the table. "I love Hayley," he said softly. Then, shifting his gaze toward Dani, he added, "I will always care for Dani. But I cannot stand by and let her actions threaten the life I have built with my wife." The courtroom buzzed, and Dani's cheeks flushed. Memories flickered behind her eyes, the grandeur of their wedding day, the bright promise that turned to smoke when she drew the gun. She had been convinced that love meant possession, that if she could not have Bill exclusively, no one would. And the moment she recognized the horror of her plan, when Bill had wrested the weapon from her grasp and she saw the terror in everyone's faces, she had realized the depth of her transgression. But remorse had not saved her from the repercussions she now faced. When Bill recounted the incident at length, Hayley noted the subtle way he described Dani's state of mind: frantic, unstable, capable of crossing lines no person should cross. It was exactly the portrayal she needed for her case. Yet every time he spoke of Dani's pain, she felt a pang of sympathy for the woman who had once been his partner. Sympathy, however, could not override the necessity of protection. After a brief recess, the defense called Nicole Worthington to the stand. Nicole took her place with the confidence of someone who believed herself immune to scrutiny. "I have watched my sister," she began, "and I have seen how she changes when she's around Mr. Parker. This isn't love. This is obsession." She recounted how Dani's moods would shift, from tears to rage, how she would follow Bill's car to work, how she had tried to force her way into his home. At the hospital, Nicole explained, she had intervened only to protect Bill from someone who no longer recognized the difference between love and madness. Hayley felt a surge of gratitude toward Nicole in that moment, though years ago, Nicole had been her fiercest critic. The memory of Nicole's scathing accusations, "You stole my sister's life," once felt like daggers. But now, standing together in this artificial daylight of the courtroom, they were allies against a common threat. Hayley caught Nicole's eye and offered a small nod. Nicole's lips twitched with what might have been approval. Outside the courthouse later that afternoon, Dani was escorted into a waiting car, her wrists bound by handcuffs that glinted like cruel ornaments. Reporters clamored, but Dani refused to look at them. Nicole, emerging moments later, spoke only to her own lawyer, her expression unreadable. Hayley and Bill slipped into their car, the roar of the engine echoing their racing hearts. Neither spoke for a long stretch, the gravity of the day settling like dust on their shoulders. That night, safe in the sanctuary of their home, Hayley and Bill lay side by side in the darkened bedroom. Hayley traced the scar on Bill's shoulder, the mark left by the gun's recoil. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. Bill paused. "What?" Hayley swallowed. "Standing by me, that day at the wedding. After everything, did you regret choosing to marry me instead of saving Dani?" Bill's thumb brushed her cheek. "I love you," he murmured. "I don't regret that for a second. But I do regret the pain Dani felt. And I regret that I let us all be torn apart." Hayley closed her eyes against the surge of emotion. They had survived the courtroom, but the deeper trials lay ahead. Indeed, as autumn's chill swept through the town, Dani's case moved towards sentencing. The judge, a woman of stern principle, balanced Dani's past service to the community, her years volunteering at shelters and mentoring troubled youth against her recent actions. When the day of sentencing arrived, Hayley watched from the front row, Bill by her side. The judge's gavel fell like a verdict of the soul. Dani received a suspended sentence, 1 year of probation, mandatory therapy, and a restraining order barring any contact with Bill and Hayley. Relief and guilt warred within Hayley's chest. One glance at Dani's hollow eyes as she was led away was enough to trigger bitter tears. Was this enough to protect them? Or would it condemn Dani to further desperation? Nicole, sitting just behind Hayley, patted her hand. "You did the right thing," she whispered. Hayley nodded, though dread lingered like an echo. In the weeks that followed, Bill plunged back into work with Hayley's unwavering support. They renovated their home, adding a sunlit reading nook where Bill could cultivate the peace he had fought so hard to reclaim. Hayley returned to her job at the publishing house, taking on new projects with a vigor that surprised even her. Yet every email or stray knock on the door sent her heart racing, half expecting Dani to appear. Dani, for her part, disappeared from public view. Rumors circulated. Some said she had checked into a rehabilitation center, others whispered of attempts to contact Bill's inner circle. Hayley and Nicole formed an uneasy alliance, pooling information and ensuring security measures, motion sensor lights, privacy fences, emergency numbers programmed on their phones. Their shared objective protecting Bill sealed bonds that had once seemed impossible. Still, a storm was gathering beneath the surface. Dani's therapy sessions, as Hayley discovered through a network of contacts, were not proceeding as hoped. Though she attended punctually, she refused to divulge her true emotions, telling her therapist only what she believed kept the peace. The therapist's notes, obtained by Nicole through a legal proxy, spoke of repressed rage and unresolved jealousy. Dani's heart, it seemed, was a well where bitterness ran deep. One rainy evening, as Hayley and Bill dined quietly in their kitchen, the unexpected happened. The doorbell rang, and when Bill opened the door, he found a small, unmarked package sitting on the threshold. Inside was a single Polaroid, Bill and Hayley on their wedding day, framed by candlelight, smiles bright. On the back, scrawled in Dani's looping script, were 2 words, "Not over." Hayley's blood ran cold. Bill's face hardened. This was no mere prank. It was a declaration that Dani's obsession was far from quelled. They immediately contacted Nicole, who sprang into action, alerting her legal team and dispatching a private investigator to track Dani's movements. But with just a Polaroid and no address, their hunt resembled chasing shadows. For Hayley, sleep became a battlefield. Every creak of the house at night sounded like a warning. She installed cameras around the property, their blinking LEDs like watchful eyes. Bill, ever her ally, patrolled the grounds with her, lanterns swinging, voices low as they reassured each other. Yet between them, the seed of fear had been planted, taking root in restless hearts. Meanwhile, Dani stood under flickering fluorescent lights in a shabby apartment 3 towns over. The walls were bare except for a small shelf of photographs, wedding shots, happy moments now spread out on a scarred wooden table. She traced each face with trembling fingers, murmuring broken apologies into the silence. "I just want him back," she whispered, tears carving trails down her cheeks. She wasn't sure who to blame more, Bill for moving on, Hayley for filling the void, or herself for losing control. Nicole's investigator made progress. Dani had bought a burner phone, rented a cheap car, and checked into motels under aliases. He was closing in when Dani checked out of her latest room, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and stoic staff who said little. The investigator relayed his findings in real time, and Nicole forwarded the updates to Hayley and Bill. Their circle tightened, but anxiety festered. Finally, the call came late one night. Dani had been spotted near the old manor house where Bill and Hayley had wed, now abandoned and overgrown. The once beautiful grounds lay neglected, the mansion's windows dark. Hayley's heart thundered as she and Bill raced through winding lanes to the manor, Nicole following close behind. In the suffocating silence of the overgrown courtyard, they found her, Dani, pale and gaunt, cradling another Polaroid, this one of what used to be their wedding venue, vines creeping through shattered windows. Her eyes burned with a fervor that married sorrow and rage. "Stop," Bill commanded, his voice echoing. "Dani, please." But she shook her head, her lips twisted in a painful smile. "I'm here for my family," she said, voice hoarse. "I need to remind him of what we had." Hayley, trembling, stepped forward. "This has to end," she pleaded. "We want you to heal, not hurt yourself more." Dani laughed, a brittle sound that shattered the quiet. "You think you can heal me?" she spat. "You think the law can fix this? You took everything from me." Her words were shotgun blasts, each aimed at the heart of their shared history. Nicole moved to flank Dani, ready to call the police. But before she could reach for her phone, Dani collapsed to her knees, clutching the Polaroid to her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tears spilled as she crumpled. The fight drained from her fists, the storm in her eyes receding until only a broken woman remained. Bill hurried forward and knelt beside her, caution and compassion warring in his expression. "Dani," he said gently, "we can help you. But you have to let us." Hayley stood behind him, arms folded, heart torn. In that moment, Dani looked up at Bill, the weight of her actions crashing down. The boundaries she had dissolved, the muzzle of a gun, the hush of the hospital room, the threshold of a courtroom, the walls of this decaying manor had all been attempts to reclaim a life that no longer existed. "I don't know how," she cried. "I'm so lost." Bill reached out, placing the Polaroid on the wet stone floor. "Then let us guide you," he said. His voice was a lifeline, thrown across a chasm of guilt and heartbreak. Nicole watched them, tears glinting in her eyes. She realized that vengeance would never bring peace to Dani, to Bill, or to Hayley. And Hayley, standing in the damp night air, realized that mercy was not weakness but a bridge back from the abyss. She took a hesitant step toward Dani, extending her hand. Dani looked at it, her breath trembling, then closed her eyes and nodded. Under the moonlit sky, amid the ruins of a dream, they formed an uneasy alliance for wounded souls seeking to rebuild. The road ahead would be long, therapy sessions, legal amendments, perhaps supervised visitations. But in that moment, as Dani accepted Hayley's hand, they took the first step together away from vengeance and toward redemption. And though the manor stood silent witness, its broken windows no longer doorways for obsession, it seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if even the stones longed for closure and for peace.